INFJs frequently feel like outliers, and in this video we will look at reasons why. One of the most defining characteristics of INFJs is their intense inner world. Dominated by introverted intuition, they are wired to make sense of abstract ideas, symbolism, and patterns. This means that INFJs are rarely focused on the here and now in the same way that many others are. Instead, they live inside a labyrinth of thoughts, visions, and insights. They can often sense things about people or situations with startling accuracy, leading others to describe them as almost psychic or uncannily perceptive. This intuitive depth, while fascinating, can create a gap between them and the more sensory, pragmatic experiences that dominate much of society. When others are discussing current trends or reacting to surface-level situations, INFJs might be silently unraveling the hidden motivations and future consequences behind them. Emotionally, INFJs are highly sensitive and deeply empathetic. Their auxiliary function, extrovert feeling, gives them a strong connection to the emotional currents around them. They absorb the moods, struggles, and joys of others, sometimes to the point of emotional overload. This deep empathy isn't merely reactive, it's proactive. INFJs often feel responsible for easing the burdens of those around them, leading them to act as emotional caretakers. Yet, this often happens while they themselves feel unseen or misunderstood. It's common for INFJs to give a great deal without others recognizing the extent of what they've sacrificed, which can feed into a quiet loneliness. Another layer of INFJ uniqueness lies in their conflicting traits. They are introverts, yet they often crave meaningful relationships. They are idealistic, yet startlingly realistic about the darker aspects of human nature. They long to express themselves authentically, but fear being judged or misunderstood. This internal push and pull gives INFJs a kind of invisible complexity. To the outside world, they might appear calm, gentle, and perhaps even reserved. But inside, there is often a storm of thought, hope, despair, love, and philosophical questioning. Their idealism is not superficial. INFJs tend to envision a better world, not in vague or utopian terms, but in deeply personal, morally anchored frameworks. They often dedicate their lives to helping others, fighting injustice, or creating art that communicates truth. But this idealism can also become a source of disillusionment. When the world fails to match their internal values, INFJs may retreat inward or become quietly cynical, not out of spite, but out of kind of mourning for what could be. Socially, INFJs often struggle to find people who truly get them. Their depth can be intimidating or simply hard to read. They're usually not interested in small talk or superficial relationships, preferring deep, soul-bearing conversations and connections that transcend the everyday. Because of this, they may come across as distant or enigmatic, even though their inner world is overflowing with love and a desire for connection. The rarity of INFJs, estimated at only about 1% to 2% of the population, amplifies this sense of difference. They might go through long stretches of life feeling like aliens among humans, always searching for someone who speaks the same inner language. INFJs also carry a heavy burden of self-expectation. Because they are so future-focused and driven by meaning, they often place intense pressure on themselves to find and fulfill their purpose. They want their lives to matter in a profound, lasting way, and anything less can feel like failure. This desire can lead to burnout, as they push themselves to live up to their own impossible standards while navigating a world that often rewards speed over depth, efficiency over ethics, and surface over soul. In many ways, INFJs are out of step with the modern world, not because they are flawed or broken, but because their strengths lie in realms that are often undervalued. In a world that prizes immediate results, quick reactions, and external validation, the INFJ's slow-building insights, emotional depth, and moral seriousness can feel like liabilities. But these very qualities, when nurtured and understood, are also what make INFJs profoundly powerful. They are often the quiet visionaries, the compassionate rebels, the artistic souls who bridge logic and feeling, intuition and action. There's a kind of timelessness to the INFJ experience, a sense that they're living slightly outside the bounds of the present moment, observing reality from a vantage point few others have access to. This sensation of being out of sync contributes to why INFJs often don't feel normal in traditional terms. They are born with a kind of existential awareness that shows up early in life. While other children are simply playing, INFJ children are often reflecting, wondering why people act the way they do, why suffering exists, or what their place in the universe is. This early onset of introspection can make them feel decades older than their peers, and this disconnect only grows with time. They are emotionally and intellectually complex, but the world often wants simplicity. INFJs sense this tension deeply. They may find that when they share their thoughts, others either misunderstand or oversimplify them, which reinforces their tendency to withdraw. Yet this retreat is not coldness, it's protection. They guard their inner lives like sacred ground, not out of arrogance, but because past experiences have shown them how rare true understanding is. Most INFJs learn to wear a mask in public, not to deceive, but to shield. They present a version of themselves that's palatable, digestible, while hiding a much more intricate self beneath the surface. It's also important to understand that INFJs often carry a persistent sense of destiny, not in a grandiose, egotistical way, but in a quiet, unshakable belief that they are meant to do something significant. They may not always know what that something is, but they can feel it, like a thread woven into their soul. This internal compass drives them relentlessly toward meaning, and until they find a path that resonates with that inner sense of calling, they can feel deeply out of place, adrift in a world that seems too loud, too fast, too shallow. They're also masterful at reading people, often before others even speak. They instinctively understand unspoken emotions, motivations, and contradictions. But this superpower is double-edged. It makes them excellent at supporting others, often being the person people turn to when they need to feel truly seen, but it also isolates them. When you can see people so clearly, it's hard not to feel disappointed by the games, defenses, and self-deceptions that many rely on. It becomes difficult to form relationships that are both emotionally honest and deeply reciprocal. One of the lesser-known aspects of the INFJ experience is the tension between their visionary nature and the mundane necessities of life. They often struggle with routine, bureaucracy, and the practical constraints of everyday existence. It's not because they're lazy or unmotivated. They're often anything, but it's that their mind is usually several layers above the present task, swirling with possibilities, concepts, and feelings that don't quite fit into to-do lists or corporate checkboxes. This disconnect can lead to frustration or even feelings of inadequacy, as they try to translate their vast inner world into tangible action. INFJs also wrestle with a kind of invisible grief. They see what the world could be, and they feel the pain of what it is. They watch people hurt each other, ignore beauty, destroy meaning, and they absorb that pain as if it were their own. This emotional sponge effect means they often need solitude to recover. Alone, they process everything they've taken in, emotionally, spiritually, even physically. But because they appear so composed, others rarely realize how much inner work INFJs are constantly doing just to stay grounded. Another reason they feel abnormal is that they rarely fit into groups, even when they try. They might be respected, even admired, but they seldom feel truly part of something. They often stand at the edge of things, observing, contributing, helping, but never quite blending in. This outsider status can become part of their identity, something they carry with equal parts pride and sadness. Relationships are another complicated realm for INFJs. They yearn for deep, soulful connections, but they are so selective, so sensitive, that finding such connections is rare. When they do find someone who meets them on that level, they can be intensely loyal, supportive, and loving. But if a relationship becomes imbalanced, shallow, or deceptive, INFJs will often withdraw silently and permanently. Their boundaries, while invisible, are absolute. They don't lash out, they vanish. INFJs are also perfectionists in a way that's different from Type A personalities. They're not necessarily trying to impress others or climb ladders. They're trying to match their reality to an inner ideal. This can be an exhausting endeavor, especially when life doesn't cooperate. Many INFJs struggle with creative block, imposter syndrome, or existential fatigue, not because they lack talent or ambition, but because they are often crushed by the weight of their own expectations. To be an INFJ is to live between worlds, the seen and the unseen, the real and the imagined, the outer and the inner. It is a lonely path, but also a powerful one. They are often the quiet revolutionaries, the behind-the-scenes healers, the poets of change. Their sense of not being normal is not just accurate, it is essential to who they are. Their difference is not a flaw to be corrected, but a gift to be protected and understood. And in a world that increasingly favors speed, conformity, and spectacle, INFJs remain a reminder that depth, intuition, and quiet vision are still profoundly needed. The INFJ's sense of not being normal doesn't stem from a desire to be different. It's more like an unshakable realization that they are different, whether they want to be or not. This distinction isn't always external or dramatic. In fact, most INFJs don't draw attention to themselves. Their difference is internal, subtle, nuanced, and often invisible to those around them. But for the INFJ, it's palpable. They feel the gap between themselves and others in almost every interaction, not because they judge others, but because their inner experience is often so vastly different from what the world seems to expect. Even in their communication style, INFJs operate on a wavelength that doesn't always sync with others. They often speak in metaphors, layered meanings, or emotionally loaded statements that may go over people's heads. Conversations that feel deep and significant to an INFJ might feel strange, heavy, or too intense to someone who's more focused on surface-level interaction. Because of this, INFJs often find themselves self-editing, holding back, or rephrasing their truth in order to be understood or to avoid rejection. They crave authenticity, but they've learned that their full selves are rarely easy for others to accept. There's also a deep-rooted conflict between their idealism and the practical demands of life. INFJs see what could be, in people, in systems, in relationships, and this vision fuels them. But that same vision can make the present feel intolerable. They can become overwhelmed by the distance between their ideals and the flawed reality they live in. This can show up as frustration, existential despair, or what some INFJs describe as a quiet emotional burnout. They carry a heavy burden of wanting to fix things, improve the world, or heal what's broken, but they often feel too alone or too small to do it all. INFJs also have a tendency to feel everything. They can walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional undercurrents, tension between people, hidden sadness, unspoken affection, quiet resentment. It's like they have a radar for the soul. But instead of just observing, they absorb. The sadness of others becomes their sadness. The anxiety in the air settles into their body. Over time, this can wear them down. Most people don't notice this gift in the INFJ because it's invisible. But for the INFJ, it can be a constant emotional drain. And when they try to explain this, people may look at them like they're being too sensitive or dramatic, reinforcing their feeling of being fundamentally misunderstood. They're also masters of contradiction. INFJs can be incredibly warm and nurturing, yet fiercely private. They can be deeply empathetic, yet coldly analytical. They might crave deep emotional intimacy, but also need large stretches of solitude to recover. These contradictions confuse people, and sometimes even confuse the INFJ themselves. They may feel guilt for needing space, or for detaching emotionally when someone needs them, even though it's a form of self-preservation. They are constantly balancing their desire to be present for others with their desperate need to protect their inner peace. Creativity for INFJs is often not a hobby, it's a lifeline. Writing, music, art, or even designing a meaningful life path is how they make sense of the world. Without a way to express the chaos inside them, they can feel trapped, stagnant, or empty. But even here, the INFJ often feels abnormal. Their creative output tends to be raw, symbolic, or intensely personal, and they may feel that no one will truly understand what they've created. Or worse, that sharing it will expose a part of them they're not ready to reveal. So even when they're pouring their heart into something, they may hide it away, unseen, like a secret garden no one visits. INFJs have a very strong moral compass. They have a strong internal sense of right and wrong that doesn't always align with social norms or authority. They're not rebellious in an outward way, but they simply cannot compromise on values that matter to them. This can make them seem stubborn, overly idealistic, or even naive to others who are more pragmatic or willing to bend. But for the INFJ, betraying their values feels like betraying their very self. This moral integrity can be isolating in a world where compromise is often expected and rewarded. INFJs long for meaning, not just in a broad, philosophical sense, but in every aspect of life: relationships, work, identity, purpose. They can't stomach superficiality for long. It feels like emotional malnourishment. So much of what the world considers normal, routine socializing, empty gestures, feel hollow to them. They often wonder, am I the only one who feels this way? Why does no one else seem bothered? This is perhaps one of the most painful aspects of the INFJ's path. Not just being different, but being alone in that difference. Yet this same disconnection is also what allows INFJs to be so deeply in touch with the human condition. They often become therapists, writers, spiritual guides, advocates, roles where their insight, empathy, and emotional intelligence can shine. And even though they may not feel normal, their presence can have a profound and healing impact on those around them. They often touch lives quietly, deeply, and permanently, even if they never quite feel like they belong in the conventional sense. To be an INFJ is to carry a hidden world inside you, a world of beauty, pain, vision, and complexity that few will ever fully see. It means constantly translating between what you feel and what you're able to express, between what you dream of and what the world accepts. It's not an easy path. It can be isolating, exhausting, and deeply misunderstood. But it's also a rare and powerful way of being, one that brings light in dark places. INFJs may never feel normal, but perhaps that's because they were never meant to be.